But I guess the Lord saw differently again there. But this is what happened. So I left the mines then, and that was about the finish of the coal mining business for me.
Well, it sounds like you have a lot of coal mining business, though, and it's,
So that
it's surprising that you know, were able to go just from one job to the other and all these mines.
That was what year that you left?
60. That was 1963
63.
that I left the mines. 1963.
Okay, just a couple of other questions I guess I had about the mining. I'll look here at my notes a minute. Just what's it really like in a coal mine? Do you have I mean, what's the feeling when you're in a coal mine?
Well, I'll tell you, I never was afraid in a coal mines. I never had a fear. And it's hard work. It's dirty work. It's wet work. Lots of water. You get into lots of places where there's lots of water coming down over you. But they're all a little bit different, the mines, and the way they operate. They aren't all the same. Just like, especially you take your shooting the coal, your drilling or whatnot. Your shooting, first of all, I should have mentioned this about when I first started in mines, how we shot this coal. You know, maybe I should say that. Okay. What we did, we bore the hole, and we had black powder. We'd buy it by the 5-gallon can, black powder. We'd take a newspaper and roll this in a newspaper, and we had a needle. They called a copper needle. We'd put this in the black powder, and run it back in the hole, and then we'd take the coal dust or rock dust, either one, wrap it in a newspaper and we called them dummies. And then we would stick that in, and we had a tampon bar. We'd run this needle in there and have this tampon bar and tamp that in like that. And then we would twist the needle and pull it out, and that left a hole the whole way back. And then we had squibs. I don't know whether any of you know what a squib is or not.
No, tell us what a squib is.
A squib is a little thing. It's a little thing it has like a wick on the end of it, and it's about the size of an 8-penny nail, that big around. But it's about 6 inches long, and it has this little wick on the end, and you light it. You stick that in that hole. And I tell you, it was very dangerous if you didn't know what you were doing. You'd stick that in that little hole, and you'd light it and then run. Run to get out of the way, you know. And boom, you go. So that was the first part of it, the first. Then we sort of graduated to a little something better. They had the black powder in sticks, and it had a hole in the center. You'd run that needle in that black powder, that hard. It was just like a piece of dynamite, only it was black powder. And you would do that likewise, so tamp it up the same way and pull the needle out, put the squib in. But anyhow, we graduated a little, and we went to the fuse and caps, and that was a little better. I'd watch my dad as he would put the fuse. You had a cap, and you'd had a fuse. You'd put this cap on this fuse and crimp it, and then you'd put it in your dynamite. You'd light it. You'd run it back, and you'd tamp it. There that thing was lit, and you was tamping that with a stick. We had a round wooden pole stick, and you were tamping that, and it sort of gave you the creeps. And there I was tamping that like that. It wasn't too bad if you only shot one shot at a time. But whenever you'd shoot 2 or 3 of them, you'd have to make the fuses longer. The first one would have to be long. The second, a little shorter. The third one, maybe a little bit shorter. And then you'd go along and light them all, and then run. That is the way we do that.
You'd have to be careful not to miscalculate on
Oh, that's
on
right.
the length of those fuses, or you would be in trouble.
And you see, it was illegal to do this. We was disobeying the law. We was in wrong by doing it. I got caught one day in there doing that by the boss. We hid it from him. We were supposed to use electric caps and a cable, a battery. Instead of that, it cost so much, you couldn't hardly afford it. The electric caps were so expensive. But one day, a boss, a foreman by the name of Bill Brown, he was about ready to leave there, and Adam Snyder was going to come to be boss, him or Jim Kimball. But I was in pulling stumps, and I'd own a couple of them up, maybe three, and I come out around, it was a curve, and here the boss was coming. And we were talking, oh, I knew I was in trouble. But all at once it went bang, boom, and we were standing there. What are you doing? He says to me. What are you doing? Well, I'm shooting, I said to him. I didn't know what to say. He says, he was there. Well, he didn't say anymore. I thought he'd fire me right in the spot. I was looking for it, but he didn't. So, whenever he was ready to leave, he came to me one day. He says, now, he says, he was a Scotchman, this fellow was. He said, Francis, he said, you better be careful with your shooting. And he let it go at that. We didn't get caught no more. Joe Sander and I was working. We were working a little later. We were working together. And he got caught. He got caught. Adam Snyder caught him. But those are some of the things. But I never was fearful. You would have thought that the times that I got hurt, that I would have been fearful of the mines. But I tell you this, I give nobody but the credit but the Lord. He took all that fear out of me, and he was right there with me. And I know one day, Harold Krieger and I was working together, and he just come to know the Lord just not too long before. We was working in a very dangerous place. And he said to me, I'll never forget it, he's in heaven right now. Just before Christmas, he went home to be with the Lord. He had an aneurysm in his head. But he said to me, I'll never forget it. I could seem to see him as we were there. We were working in a place, the crossbars were bending, and it was working. It was nicking, you know. The post, you'd hear them nicking, just like picking on a guitar string. But anyhow, he said, you know, to me, he says, I feel the presence of the Lord here. I said, I do too. But we were there. We had our track in there. But that is what I said. So many incidents. I just have to give him the credit. I have to do it.
Another question I was wondering, sort of a typical day at the mines. You know, the time you got up and the hours you worked and when you quit, that type of thing. What was sort of a typical day for you? And maybe that varied from mine to mine, but what was sort of a typical day?
You mean the hours? Or?
Yes.
Well, we started in the mines like there at Acosta, the mechanized mines. We started in pretty early. Some of the other mines you could make it your own hours, pretty much. You want to work long hours, you could, where it wasn't union. But the most of my time was union, and you had a certain amount of hours, certain time to go in and a certain time to come out. You'd clock in. This one mines I was at, you'd clock in at 6:30 and be out. You'd be on the outside 8 hours. You was to be back on the outside. But now these house coal mines, you could just work what you wanted to because they weren't union. But I joined the union in 1939, and there was a little time period in between that I didn't belong to the union. I belong to the union 50-some years now, United Mine Workers, and they have done me well. And I have it good. I have a pension, a United Mine Worker pension. I have a black lung pension from the mines, and also got a health card for my wife and I. Pays it all. So the Lord has been good to us. It is he.
Okay. So John L. Lewis helped you out then.
Oh my, yes. Old John, he did a lot for us. Guys,
Let me look and see if there's any. Oh, the equipment you use. Just talk a little bit about that. And certainly, you know, I guess most people be aware of wearing a helmet, but hard hat, I guess you call it. But what other type of equipment did you have to mine coal?
well, I tell you, now it depended on too the kind of a mines you were in. Now the smaller mines, we had our picks, and our shovels, and we had our augers, and we had our tamping bar. Mines. You had to wear your hard hat. You had to wear hard-toed shoes. You wore them, and you had your shovels and your pick and your augers, your drills. Of course, they furnished the drill. They were electric drills, big drills. It took 2 men to operate one of those, and one man couldn't operate those big drills, especially when you were drilling rock, you know, shooting down top. I done quite a bit of that too, drilled rock and shot top down for main headings and barred it. That you had all that to deal with.
Well, like picks, I would suspect those needed some attention after a while. They probably needed sharpened and things like that. Who did that? Did you take care of your own, or?
Well, some of the mines I took care of my own. You would have to sharpen them every evening because they would get dull, and sometimes you would hit a sulfur ball when you'd be mining the coal, and you would have to. They would break off the tips. Well, then you couldn't use them. You take them out. We had a blacksmith right outside. There was a building there. There was a blacksmith at each one of these mines, and they would sharpen your picks. But the smaller mines, I sharpened my own. I learned that. Learned how to temper them. You know, you'd have to make them hot, put them in a forge, and turn them to crank and make them hot, and then hammer them out, and then take your water and temper them. So that is the way we had to do.
Where did you buy your mining equipment? Where could you purchase mining equipment?
Well, I bought one at a different time, different places. There at Acosta, I bought it at a company store. And they expected you to buy it at the company store. If you didn't buy your stuff at the company store, you had a bad place to work in. They saw to that. They wanted you to move even in their houses. I never moved in none of their houses though, but I did buy quite a bit at the company store. And whenever you would buy at the company store and you would give them real money, they didn't give you real money back. They gave you jinky tin, they called it back.
What was it called?
Jinky tin.
Jinky tin.
Jinky tin, that's what we called it. That's what you'd get back in change. Say if you'd go in there and it'd be something less than $1. You didn't get the regular change back. They give you jinky tin. I had lots of that. I probably have some of that laying around now. I don't know where it is, but that was like at that mines. I bought my hard hat, my belt. You had to buy a big wide belt to carry a battery on, you know, an electric battery. We didn't use the carbide lights there or them places because the Acosta was a gaseous mines. At one time they had an explosion there. There was people got killed there. At least one or so got killed. I think the man who got killed there, my dad was working there at that time. He worked at Acosta. See, he was a coal miner too, part of his life, not his whole life.
The carbide lights you mentioned, I know a lot of people are still fascinated by carbide lights, and as I see them going at sales now, sometimes they bring a pretty good price. Just tell me a little bit about the carbide light, how it worked, and that type of thing.
Okay. The carbide light, you had to buy carbide to put in it. You had on the top, there was a container on the top that you would put water in it, fill it with water. And it had a little lever, a little control. You put the carbide in the bowl, the bottom part, a certain amount. You didn't want to fill it too full because when it get a little bit wet, it swelled up. You had to keep it down. I only filled mine, I'd say about half full. And until it was done, it was full because of the water drippings. You had to let the water, you turn this on. It was a regulator on there's a regulator on those carbide lights. And you just keep moving that. If you don't, you'd regulate it to determine the length of the flame you had coming out of the jet. And if it would get down low, the flame would get short, you would just give it another notch. And that would throw you a bigger flame out. So you could see better that way. Or otherwise, you just couldn't see right. But I usually had mine out pretty big, pretty good flame. So I could see good in there. Because if you didn't, you just couldn't see right.
How long would a bowl full, or as you say, you fill about half full, how long would that usually last?
Oh, that would last, it would last a couple of hours. We'd have to fill up during the 8 hours, I'd say maybe 3 times. Not over that. But we'd buy our carbide in a great big can. That's the way we purchased it, was with a large can. Then we had it all the time. Same way with when we were buying dynamite. We use a lot of dynamite. We'd buy it by the case. I shot cases and cases of that stuff in the mines. In fact, my brother, he built us we worked together, my oldest brother, one is dead. He built a dynamite place below his house. You had to keep it away from your house. And he built this thing where we kept the dynamite in. And then when we wanted it, we'd go and buy it by the case and bring it, fill that up. And when we wanted it, we had it. We didn't need to run so often that way. We'd get a whole bunch at a time.
Tell me about lunchtime in the mines. I was never in a mine, so did everybody eat at the same time? Did you eat together? Tell us a little bit about your lunch buckets, whatever you can think about lunchtime. What happened at lunchtime?
Well, you eat when you had a chance. You didn't have a special time to eat because the way it was, when you had cars, you wanted to load them. You would eat whenever they would move out, when the motor would come in and take them out, and then you'd grab a bite to eat. But maybe you'd eat your pie or whatever. I usually eat my pie first. I thought that way, if I get killed, at least I'll have my pie. But anyhow, what I was going to say, our lunch buckets, there was three containers. The one that I had, I showed part of it out there. There was a bottom container, which you put your water in. You had that filled with water below. Then there was another deck that was where you put your sandwiches in, or your sandwiches or whatever you wanted to put in. And then there was another one on the top of that your wife maybe would make you a pie. It was like a little pie pan. She'd make your goodies in there. You'd have a dessert, you might say, in that one. And that's what your lunch bucket consisted of. But you always had your water, you had your sandwiches, you had your desserts or your pie on top. But a lot of times, some of the men, we would eat pushing our car, lots of times. Going along, eat your sandwich, pushing the car into the place to load. That's the way we worked. We never took time off for to eat. Never.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, never. We always worked from the time we went in till the time we come out. Unless we weren't getting the proper amount of cars. Then you would have time. Or otherwise, why, you didn't eat only whenever you could. Time.
In your accident that happened, did any account of that ever happen? Was that anything about that in the newspaper? Do you know?
I believe it was in the one was, I know, it was in the newspaper.
Yeah, the reason I asked sometime, and I offer this to you, we certainly could go back and get copies of those old newspapers. We have them at the Historical Society or the library, and we might want to look and see what they wrote in the paper about your accident that happened.
I think it was. I have the compensation papers here that it shows just what happened.
Well, let me make you that offer. If you ever want to do that, I'd be happy to go with you as long as we have the date.
Yeah.
And we can go and we can search the newspaper and just see what it might have said about your accident.
Yeah.
If something was there, I would suspect that probably something was in the
I would think that it was, but that was 1942. February 1942 is when it was.
Well, we certainly could find that. This seems to be like an unusual question, but I know as coal miners, as I see them outside after a day's work, you know, you're black, you're filthy. How in the world did you get cleaned up?
Well, when I went home, I was pretty dirty always. And many a time when I went home at some of these mines, when I walked, my clothes was froze on me. Your pants was froze stiff. You had to walk. One mines I worked in, I walked a couple mile a day. We'd start in the morning with a carbide light lit and come home with it lit to see. But then my clothes would be froze on me. And then one mines I worked at, like there at Costa, it was that cold when we'd ride the man trip that my hat would be froze on my head till you get out. It was that cold coming out, riding that man trip out. It was that cold in there. I saw one man, his ears even froze. What I mean is, as he was going in, they froze open. He was working with me, and his ears froze and bursted. Water run out of him. It was a pretty rough deal. But you know what? I still liked it. I liked my work.
Yeah, it sounds as though you did, and I'm not sure I
really
would
did.
like all those conditions you're talking about. Well, after you get out and you walked home, you had the pants were frozen, this type of thing. Did you have to change clothes every day then?
Well,
Or
no, we didn't change clothes every day.
I didn't think you probably.
No,
would.
we didn't. I wore my clothes. What I mean, I would wear them, well, pretty near maybe a week, the clothes. And I know one mines I worked at, that was shortly after we were married, that we lived with my mother-in-law. And I'd come home with my old dirty clothes. I'll never forget her. She took my boots. They would be all wet inside. And she took them boots and she turned them wrong side out, laid them on the old warming closet on the old cook stove, and dried them boots for me so they'd be dried for the next morning. And if she saw a hole in my pants, which many times was, she'd take them old dirty pants and lay them on her lap and patch them. My mother-in-law did that for me. So I just thank the Lord that he gave me a good mother-in-law like that.
Other than your clothes, as far as your face and your hands and the rest of your body, did you bath every day?
Oh yeah. So you come home. I had a shower in the basement of our house. I'd just go straight to the basement because you didn't want to walk around the house with those dirty clothes on, dirt falling off. But I had a nice place made to put a nice shower in the basement. I'd get out there and shower good, wash, and I did that every evening when I come home.
Did you ever work in a situation in a mine where you had women working with you?
No.
What's your feeling about that? What maybe not your feeling, what would have been the feeling of miners? Let's put it that way. What would have been the feeling of miners had a woman applied for a job back in the 30s or 40s and come into the mine? What would the miners have said?
Well, when I was in there, the most of them wouldn't have cared about it. I know that. I know some of them did go in the mines afterwards. There was no women working in the mines that I know of, not around where I worked. Any of the years that I put in, there was never no women in any of those mines. But I do know afterwards, my brother-in-law was a foreman, the one, Harold Krieger, is a man I told you just passed away. He had a couple women working for him. That wasn't too many years ago. But he had some women in the mines.
Okay. You recall any funny stories or pranks or things such as that miners would pull on each other at times?
Yes. I remember of a prank that I helped to do for the guy. helped to do this. He was our crew leader over at Acosta. And we'd, in there sometimes, like I said, whenever we had no cars or anything, we would eat, you know. But most of the time not. But anyhow, we had some of this here cup grease. You know what cup grease is. Okay. We took this and we had a wax paper and we put a lot of this cup grease in this wax paper and wrapped it all up nice and neat and put it in our crew leader's bucket. And when he went to get his lunch, we watched him. And he got this paper out, this cup grease. He didn't know that one. I wonder what this is my wife put in there, he said. He kept on wrapping and on wrapping. Finally he saw what it was.
You were in trouble then.
Oh, my. We just hollered and laughed. You know, he took it as a joke, though. He was a nice guy. Leroy Whipperman was the fellow. He was the crew leader. But he was so nice about it.
I've often heard stories about rats being in mines, and I guess you've seen them in mines, but if rats, any other animals that you ever run into in a mine?
I only ever saw rats and mice in mines. I saw both. Mice. I saw more mice than rats.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, there was a lot of mice.
Yeah, I've read some places where even the miners at times would sort of feed the rats, you know, from their lunch pail, you know,
Mm-hmm.
crumbs, anything that was left over, because I guess at least the story was they liked to sort of have them around because they saw the rats clearing out. They thought it was time for them to clear out too. So I don't know whether there's any.
Well, I'll
truth to
tell
that
you
or not.
one advantage about maybe I don't know if this is time to say this or not, but one thing about a carbide light is a benefit too. Because if you're working in the mines and stone workings and you pulled all the pillars are all pulled out, you got to be careful of black damp. And you go in there with that there carbide light, it'll go out. It'll get shorter and shorter and shorter. If you get black damp in the mines where you're working, say in your place, your room, the flame on the light will get shorter and shorter. You turn the water up, regulator up, but it doesn't do any good. It just keeps shorter and shorter. Finally, it goes out. It's time for you to get out then, because you're gonna die if you don't. So that happened to me already.
And I can see the advantage then of having the
Oh yeah,
carbide
right.
with that.
That's right.
Did you ever find anything unusual as you were mining coal? And I guess I'm thinking, you know, about fossils or just anything unusual. You mentioned the sulfur balls, and you know you run into those, but anything unusual you ever find
Yes.
when you work in a mine?
I saw things in the coal in there that looked like fern leaves, or maybe different things like that pertaining to that. Looked like fern leaves, looked like other pieces like grasses you'd see, but mostly the fern leaves. It just looked exactly like a fern leaf. And then I saw things in there that it looked like a snake had crawled through, and it was right in there. It looked like it might have been a snake, but you couldn't tell for sure whether it was or not. But it was long. It would be maybe that long, maybe 18 inches to 2 feet long. I saw that in. And then you'll run into things that's like a fault's in there. You know what a fault is.
Well, tell us what a fault is. That
A
way.
fault, you run into a fault. It's a place in the mines where it's deformed. It's not formed, the coal. And it comes down, the fault, it comes down, and what it is, it's clay. And maybe the rock is turned on the edges. It isn't formed in layers like, it's in the edges, or standing sideways. And you have to work your way through that. But there is where you see these things, this fault, where, I don't know, sometime or other, it looked like it was erupted. And maybe sometimes these faults, you drive through them where you'd have clay, you'd have rock, you'd have sulfur balls. It was just a mixture. And you'd have to work through that in order to get on the other side, and then you'd come into the coal. It would be uniform. But that's what a fault is.
So when you're in a mine and you're working through a fault, or you're working through rocks, anything like that, you're really not making much money then, because you're not putting any coal out, and you pay based on, I guess, the amount of coal that you
That's right.
you send out.
Some of the mines that I worked in, we went in, worked rock all day, made nothing. Made nothing, didn't pay for the rock. Back in those days, it was different from what it is today. And I never worked on a job where I got paid by the hour. I worked on a job that was all piecework. But there was days I went in the mines, shot my dynamite to shoot this rock, loaded it out, didn't get anything. The next day, when it was cold, then I made some. But your wages were very small back in those times. You just didn't make much. But the latter days, I made a little more. It was better, you know. But my best when I worked for the Consolidated Coal Company was about $35 a week. I know that I heard our foreman say once, or not our foreman, our crew leader said, he said, "You think we can make $100 for the 2 weeks? That'd be $50 a week. We're going to try for it." We never did it. We never made it. We worked hard, but the wages were small. But things weren't like they are today either. Things weren't as high. But still, I say this, I'm farther ahead today. We're farther ahead today than we were back those days. I'd rather be living now than then, because I think it's better. Especially, you know, your work and your wages that you get. But back then, they'd say, I know one time the one said to the boss, said to us, I tell you, I want to say this. When I went for the Consol, the reception that we got, it was shameful, the way they talked to you. We got on the man trip, we rode a long ways. There was about 16 of us, new ones starting. And the boss, he got off the man trip, and he run up the head of the motor. He said, he said, "You old guys that's been here, go on down the heading. I want to talk to you new guys." And I was one of the new guys. He says to me, he says to us, he said, "We come in," which I didn't blame him for saying part of it. He said, "We come in here to work. We don't come in here," and then he used a bad word. I wouldn't say it. But he says, otherwise, he says, if any of yous, he said, think otherwise. He said, get your buckets, and he cussed and he swore. He said, "You see the way you come in, head for out on foot." He says that that's the way we feel about it. He said, "You're going to work if you work in here." Well, that was all right. I didn't hire there not to work. I wanted to work. And I think the most of them did. He said, especially, he said, if you was a WPA worker. Now, that's what he said. He said, the leaning on your shovels and breaking the handles.
He wasn't too happy with them then.
No.
Yeah. Did you, in your mining experiences that you had, I know sometimes there were some conflicts with other nationalities, perhaps. Did you work with all types of people, or were most of the people you worked with German background, or didn't that seem to enter into your mining experience at all?
Yes, it did. When I worked for the Consol, they were about all foreign people. Most of them were. They were Italians, and they were Russians. Or, in fact, our night foreman was a Russian. He was mean. He was a mean guy. But anyhow, I had a crew leader that was I think he was from Russia, and I couldn't understand him. It made it rough. And I had a scraper. I was running the conveyor, and I had a scraper that he was a Polish guy. I could understand him pretty good. His name was Trello. But this Steve Polosko, he was our crew leader. And I tell you, the only thing that I could understand him is when he would swear. He knew how to swear. He knew how to say the swear word. But I couldn't understand him. And it made it difficult. He'd get mad. They'd get mad at you. He'd try to tell you something you didn't waste talking about. Well, that was the most at Acosta that I worked with a lot of those foreign guys. Some of them were good workers, so they worked. But then some of them, they didn't care either. They'd get angry at you if you couldn't understand them. But what were you going to do? You just had to work with them.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here in mining. Bill, did you have anything that, in our conversation, that you wanted to ask of Mr. Geary?
I was concerned about compensation, and I think you covered that pretty well on the things that you said, hardly ever working for an hourly rate, you know, and of course this idea of starting before dark and going home when it was still until dark and not taking lunch breaks and so on. And I guess the other thing that I was quite impressed with is the fact that as you went from job to job, you remembered your supervisors by their first name and just on and on, and you certainly had a variety and quite a wide, extensive background in the mining, and this has been very informative as far as I'm concerned, and I'm sure for the record it's.
Yeah, so we're very, very, very pleased with what we've talked about here today, and probably a lot more we could talk about. I had one thing down here, about the mining terms, but I know there's a lot of them, and you mentioned a lot of them in your conversation. So I guess we'll say at this time that probably we're going to close here for today, but we certainly appreciate your taking time with us, Mr. Gary, and sharing this with us, and perhaps someday we'll have to get together and pick up some more things about mining. You certainly have had a great career in mining, and it's surprising to me to hear you say that you liked it, and I suspect if you could, you'd go back and do it again. So I don't know whether I'd want to be in a mine. I've never been in one. I'd like to go in one sometime just to visit, but the conditions, the dampness, and that type of thing must not be too good. I guess the constant temperature is not so bad. But
It's nice in the winter.
yes, I would suspect that's
It's
not.
a very nice, that's what I liked in the winter, no snow. It was interesting, and it was good, and I'd do it all over.
Well, that's good to hear you say.
I'd do it all over again, be happy to.
And that's good to hear you say.
Even with what I went through, the tragedies that hit me, but I shall never forget. I'll say it and say it again, the Lord was with me. I have to give him the credit.
And I think even, we probably don't have time to talk a lot about that, but I think even some of your accidents, I think, influenced your
Absolutely.
commitment to that. And I don't know, we talked before one time, you mentioned about pending revivals, and, really got you thinking about, why you were here and what the Lord had in mind for you, and certainly it sounds as though he was with you. Well, again, we thank you very much and wish you well.
Well, thank you.
Okay.